I stood frozen in my wedding dress as my parents unveiled a "Congratulations on medical school" banner for my sister in the middle of my reception. My husband squeezed my hand as my sister smiled triumphantly. I simply unpinned my veil, placed it on the gift table, and walked out of my own wedding celebration without a word. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning of June 12th had started like a dream. After months of meticulous planning, the day I'd marry Daniel had finally arrived. The venue we'd saved for over a year to afford was perfect. A renovated barn with string lights, wildflower arrangements, and the rustic, elegant atmosphere I'd always imagined for the most important day of my life. My best friend Tessa helped. Me into my dress, a vintage-inspired lace gown I'd found at a small boutique in Oakridge. It wasn't extravagant, but it was exactly what I wanted. Simple, elegant, meaningful. I'd spent hours hand-sewing small pearl beads along the hem, a technique my grandmother had taught me before she passed away last year. She wouldn't be here to see me marry Daniel, but having this small connection to her made it feel like she was somehow present. "You look absolutely stunning, Emma," Tessa said, her eyes welling up as she stepped back to look at me. "Daniel is going to lose his mind when he sees you." I smiled, feeling a rare moment of true contentment. Growing up as the middle child in the Taylor family meant I was often overlooked. My older brother James was the athletic star. My younger sister, Lily, was the academic prodigy headed to medical school, and I was just Emma, the reliable one, the practical one, the one who'd forged her own path without much fanfare or support. "Do you think my parents will actually make it through the day without mentioning Lily's acceptance letter?" I asked. Tessa, only half joking. She rolled her eyes sympathetically. "They wouldn't dare. Not today." But even as she said it, I could see the doubt in her eyes. We both knew my parents too well. My relationship with my parents had always been complicated. They weren't cruel or abusive, just persistently focused elsewhere. My father, Dr. Richard Taylor, was a respected cardiologist who'd always envisioned his children following in his medical footsteps. My mother, Catherine, was the perfect doctor's wife, involved in charity committees, impeccably dressed, and relentlessly ambitious for her children. I'd disappointed them by choosing to become an elementary school art teacher, a noble profession, they'd say publicly, while privately questioning why I'd waste my potential on something that would never bring prestige or a substantial income. They didn't understand that connecting with children through art brought me more fulfillment than any prestigious career ever could. When Daniel proposed a year ago, their response had been lukewarm at best. "He seems nice," my mother had said, examining the modest engagement ring with barely concealed disappointment. "Are you sure you don't want to wait? You're only 28. The irony wasn't lost on me that they'd been thrilled when my brother got engaged at 24 to a surgeon's daughter, or that they constantly worried that Lily, at 25, was focusing too much on her career and not enough on finding a suitable partner. Daniel wasn't what they considered suitable. He was a freelance photographer who supplemented his income by teaching photography classes at the community center where we'd met. He was talented, kind, and genuinely saw me in a way no one in my family ever had. To them, he was just another example of my settling for less. The wedding planning had been a series of small battles. My parents had offered to contribute financially, which I'd gratefully accepted, not realizing it would come with so many strings attached. They'd pushed for a country club reception rather than the rustic barn venue we loved. They'd tried to expand the guest list to include my father's colleagues rather than keeping it intimate as we preferred. Each time, I'd pushed back gently but firmly, determined that this day would reflect Daniel and me, not my parents' social aspirations. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. My father entered, looking uncomfortable in his formal suit. "It's time," he said, his expression unreadable. "You look nice." From my father, this was practically effusive praise. I smiled, determined not to let anything dampen my spirits. "Thanks, Dad. I'm ready." The ceremony was everything I'd hoped for. Daniel's face when he saw me walking down the aisle is a memory I'll treasure forever. His vows were heartfelt and personal, bringing tears to my eyes and laughter from our guests. For those precious moments, nothing else mattered. Not my parents' subtle disapproval, not the lifetime of feeling secondary. It was just Daniel and me, promising to build a life together based on mutual respect, support, and genuine appreciation. The trouble began during the reception. Everything started beautifully. The barn looked magical as twilight approached, with fairy lights twinkling against rustic wooden beams. Our first dance was to an acoustic version of the song that had been playing when we first met. Daniel's best man gave a touching speech about how he'd never seen his friend so happy until I came into his life. Then my father stood up for his toast. "When Emma was little," he began, and I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just this once, he might focus solely on me. She was always so independent. While her brother was winning trophies and Lily was reading college-level books in elementary school, Emma was content to march to her own drummer. I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine. He knew exactly what my father was doing, even if it wasn't obvious to others. "I admit I didn't always understand Emma's choices," my father continued. "But seeing her today with Daniel, I can see that she's found someone who appreciates her. Unique approach to life." He raised his glass. "To Emma and Daniel, may you build a life that makes you both happy." It wasn't overtly insulting, but the subtext was clear to anyone who knew my father. The emphasis on my unique approach, rather than any actual accomplishments. The subtle comparison to my siblings' more impressive achievements. The faint surprise that I'd found someone who valued me. I plastered on a smile and thanked him as he sat down. Daniel leaned over and whispered, "He has no idea how lucky they are to have you. But I do." That moment of connection with Daniel centered me again. This was our day, and I wouldn't let my father's backhanded compliments ruin it. The evening progressed and I began to relax. The food was delicious. The band was playing all our favorite songs. And seeing our friends from different parts of our lives connecting and enjoying themselves felt deeply satisfying. Maybe, just maybe, we'd make it through the night without any major family drama. I should have known better. I was dancing with Daniel's grandmother when I noticed my parents huddled with Lily near the entrance, looking suspiciously animated. My mother was gesturing to the staff, who nodded and began moving toward the small stage where the band was playing. "What are they doing?" I murmured, more to myself than to Daniel's grandmother. She followed my gaze and frowned. "Something tells me you should go find out, dear." I excused myself and made my way across the dance floor, trying to ignore the sense of dread building in my stomach. Before I could reach them, the band stopped playing, and the lead singer announced that there was a special family announcement. My mother took the microphone, her smile wide and excited in a way I rarely saw directed at anything I did. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have some wonderful family news to share on this already joyous occasion." I froze in the middle of the dance floor, suddenly aware of all eyes moving between my mother and me. Daniel appeared at my side, his hand finding mine. "As many of you know, our youngest daughter Lily has always been exceptionally bright," my mother continued, beaming at my sister who stood beside her, looking simultaneously uncomfortable and pleased. "Today, we received the news that not only has she been accepted to Princeton Medical School, but she's been awarded the prestigious Langford Scholarship, which covers her full tuition." The room erupted in applause. I stood motionless as two servers wheeled in a large cake decorated with Princeton's colors, and the words, "Congratulations, Dr. Lily Taylor, soon to be," written in elegant script. My father unfurled a large banner that read, "Princeton Med School, bound," and hung it right next to our just married sign. I couldn't breathe. They had literally hijacked my wedding reception, the one day that was supposed to be about Daniel and me, to celebrate Lily's accomplishment. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice a mixture of concern and controlled anger. "Do you want me to say something?" Before I could answer, my mother was speaking again. "We're so proud of all our children, of course," she added, almost as an afterthought. "And so happy to be celebrating Emma and Daniel's union today. But when we got this news this morning, we just couldn't wait to share it with all our family and friends." My sister, to her credit, looked somewhat mortified, though not enough to actually stop what was happening. She caught my eye across the room and mouthed what might have been sorry, though it was hard to tell for certain. The room felt suddenly too warm, too crowded. Years of similar moments flashed through my mind. My high school art show that my parents had left early, because Lily had a debate tournament the next day. My college graduation dinner that had somehow turned into a celebration of James's medical school acceptance. Countless birthdays where my accomplishments were mentioned briefly before moving on to the real achievements in the family. But this was my wedding day. The one day that should have been immune to their perpetual prioritization of my siblings. "We have champagne for a special toast," my father announced as servers began distributing flutes. "To Lily, whose hard work and brilliant mind have opened doors to an outstanding future in medicine." The guests raised their glasses uncertainly, many of them looking uncomfortably in my direction. I could see Tessa across the room, her face a mask of shock and outrage. Daniel's parents stood frozen, champagne untouched, clearly appalled by my parents' behavior. Something inside me snapped, not in a dramatic, rage-filled way, but in a quiet, decisive manner. A boundary I hadn't even known I needed suddenly crystallized with perfect clarity. I looked up at Daniel, the only person who had ever truly seen and valued me exactly as I was. "I love you," I said simply, "but I can't stay here right now." Understanding filled his eyes, along with a fierce protectiveness that made me love him even more. "Whatever you need," he said. "I'm with you." I walked calmly to the front of the room. The crowd parted silently, all eyes on me. My parents. Smiles faltered as I approached. "Emma, isn't this wonderful news about your sister?" my mother said, her voice carrying a warning edge that I recognized from childhood, the one that said, "Don't make a scene." I didn't respond to her. Instead, I reached up and carefully unpinned my veil, the antique lace that had belonged to my grandmother, the only family member who had ever made me feel truly valued. I folded it carefully and placed it on the gift table. "Emma?" My father's voice held confusion rather than concern. I looked at them both directly, feeling strangely calm. "This was my wedding day," I said, my voice quiet but clear enough for those nearby to hear. "The one day that should have been about Daniel and me, and you couldn't even give us that." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the barn into the warm June evening. I heard Daniel say something firmly to my parents, though I couldn't make out the words, before he followed me outside. "Are you okay?" he asked, catching up to me in the garden. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." He nodded, taking my hand. "What do you want to do now?" I looked back at the barn, where our wedding reception continued without us. Through the open doors, I could see my parents standing awkwardly by the Princeton cake, guests giving them a wide berth. "Let's go," I said. "Where?" Daniel asked, already pulling out his car keys. "Anywhere but here." As we drove away from what should have been the happiest celebration of our lives, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. For the first time, I had walked away instead of swallowing my hurt and pretending everything was fine. It hurt. Of course it did. But underneath the pain was something new and unfamiliar. Self-respect. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if I would ever be able to forgive my parents or what our relationship would look like moving forward. But I did know that something fundamental had changed within me. The old Emma, the one who accepted being overlooked and diminished, was gone. Daniel reached over and took my hand as we drove, the road ahead of us open and unknown. "For what? It's worth," he said quietly. "I've never been prouder to be your husband than I am right now." I squeezed his hand, feeling tears finally start to fall. They weren't just tears of hurt and disappointment, though those emotions were certainly present. They were also tears of release, of letting go of the desperate hope that my parents would ever see me clearly, of shedding the weight of constantly seeking approval that would never come. "Where to, Mrs. Mitchell?" Daniel asked, his use of my new married name bringing a small smile to my face despite everything. I thought for a moment. "Remember that little bed and breakfast on the coast we found last summer? The one with the private beach access?" He nodded, already changing direction toward the coastline. "Perfect choice." As the landscape changed, from manicured farmland to the wild beauty of the coastal highway, I felt my breathing ease. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I was choosing myself. And with Daniel beside me, I wasn't doing it alone. The old Emma might have turned the car around, might have swallowed her pain and rejoined the celebration for appearance's sake. But that Emma was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who finally understood that walking away wasn't giving up. It was standing up. I looked out at the darkening horizon, where the last light of day met the vast ocean. Ahead lay uncharted territory, both literally and emotionally. But for the first time in my life, I was ready to navigate it on my own terms. The bed and breakfast looked exactly as I remembered it, a weathered blue Victorian perched on the edge of where land met sea. Moonlight illuminated the breaking waves as the innkeeper, an elderly woman named Martha, welcomed us with concerned eyes. "Honeymoon suite is ready, though you both look like you've had quite a day." Daniel squeezed my hand. "We have," he said simply. "We definitely have." Morning sunlight streamed through lace curtains as I awoke, still in my wedding dress. I hadn't even realized I'd fallen asleep. Daniel was already up, sitting in the window seat overlooking the ocean, camera in hand. He was capturing the sunrise, the golden light spilling over the water like possibility itself. "Morning, wife," he said, noticing I was awake. Despite everything, those words brought a smile to my face. "Morning, husband." We were married. That fact remained true, regardless of how the celebration had ended. The certificate was signed, the vows exchanged. No one could take that away, not even my parents. Daniel set his camera down and came to sit beside me on the bed. "How are you feeling today?" It was a loaded question. How was I feeling? Hurt, angry, betrayed, but also lighter somehow. Like I'd finally put down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. "I feel like I've woken up," I said finally. "Like I've been sleepwalking through my relationship with my family, accepting their behavior as normal, and suddenly I'm awake." Daniel nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "What do you want to do now?" I looked down at my wedding dress, now wrinkled from being slept in. "First, I want to get out of this dress. Then I want coffee. And then—" I paused, considering. "Then I want to figure out what happens next." The dress wasn't easy to remove without Tessa's help, but Daniel and I managed it together, laughing despite ourselves at the absurdity of the situation. I changed into the clothes Daniel had thought to grab from the car, the outfit I'd planned to wear when we left the reception for our honeymoon. Martha had coffee waiting downstairs, along with freshly baked scones and a sympathetic smile that suggested she'd seen her fair share of family dramas over the years of running the inn. "I took the liberty of extending your reservation for a few days," she said, refilling my coffee cup. "Figured you might need some time." I looked at Daniel, who nodded. "Thank you," I said. "That's incredibly kind." "Weddings," Martha said with a knowing shake of her head. "They bring out the best and worst in families." As we sat on the wraparound porch, watching the waves crash against the shore, my phone began to buzz incessantly in my purse. I'd ignored it until now, but curiosity finally got the better of me. 15 missed calls from my mother, 7 from my father, 3 from Lily, dozens of text messages, most from Tessa keeping me updated on what had happened after we left. Apparently, our departure had caused quite the stir. Several of our friends had followed our lead, leaving the reception early in a show of solidarity. Daniel's parents had publicly but politely expressed their disappointment in my parents' behavior before departing as well. Even some of my father's colleagues, people who had known me since childhood, had made excuses and left. The celebration, effectively over. Tessa reported that my parents had been blindsided by the reaction. They seemed genuinely shocked that anyone would find their behavior inappropriate. Lily had apparently been mortified once she fully realized what they'd done, though not enough to speak up in the moment. "Your sister came looking for you after," Tessa wrote. "She seemed genuinely upset, said she had no idea they were planning to make such a big announcement. I wasn't sure I believed that. Lily had always been adept at playing innocent while benefiting from my parents' favoritism." The most recent message was from my mother, sent just an hour ago. "Emma, please call us. We don't understand why you left your own wedding. We were just sharing some good news in front of family and friends who care about Lily, too." The lack of awareness in her message made me set the phone down without responding. They still didn't get it. Maybe they never would. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, watching my face carefully. "I'm thinking that I'm 30 years old, and this is the first time I've ever truly stood up for myself with my family," I said, the realization hitting me with full force. "And I'm wondering what that says about me." Daniel took my hand. "It says you're loyal and forgiving, maybe to a fault, but it also says you have a breaking point, which is healthy." I leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "What would you do if you were me? Would you call them back?" He was quiet for a long moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I think I'd take some time first. Figure out what you want from the relationship going forward, what boundaries you need to set, then decide if and when you're ready to talk to them." His advice resonated with something deep inside me. All my life I'd been reacting to my family's behavior, accommodating, adjusting, accepting. I'd never stopped to consider what I actually wanted from these relationships. "You're right," I said. "I need to figure that out first." We spent the next 3 days in a kind of peaceful seclusion. We walked on the beach, took photographs, read books from Martha's extensive library, and really talked, about what we wanted our life together to look like. "I was thinking," Daniel said on our third evening as we sat watching the sunset, "this isn't how we plan to spend our honeymoon, but it's still time together. Maybe we should look at it that way." I smiled, touched by his effort to reframe our situation. "Are you saying we should make the best of our non-honeymoon honeymoon?" "I'm saying," he replied, pulling me closer, "that I'm married to an incredible woman who finally stood up for herself, and I'd like to celebrate that, even if it's not how we planned." That night, we opened a bottle of wine on the beach and toasted to new beginnings. The stars above us seemed to multiply as the sky darkened, reminding me how small our problems were in the grand scheme of things. Yet they weren't insignificant. Our experiences, our boundaries, our self-respect mattered, regardless of how tiny we were under that vast cosmic tapestry. On the fourth day, My phone rang with Lily's number. I'd been ignoring all their calls, but something made me answer this one. Emma? Her voice sounded smaller than usual, missing the confident edge I'd grown accustomed to. Are you okay? The question surprised me. It wasn't what I'd expected from her. Not really, I answered. Honestly. But I'm getting there. She was quiet for a moment. I'm so sorry about what happened. I should have stopped them. I didn't know they were going to make such a big deal at your wedding, I swear. I wanted to believe her. Part of me did. But another part remembered all the times Lily had passively accepted my parents' preferential treatment without ever acknowledging it or standing up for me. Why didn't you? I asked. Stop them, I mean. She sighed. I don't know. Everything happened so fast. Mom was so excited and Dad had already ordered the cake and banner. By the time I realized what they were planning, it felt like… She trailed off. Like it was easier to go along with it? I suggested. Yeah, she admitted. I'm not proud of that. Her honesty was unexpected. Lily and I had never really talked about the dynamic in our family. We'd both just played our assigned roles. She the golden child, me the overlooked middle sibling. Have you ever noticed, I said carefully, how they treat you differently than they treat me? There was a long pause. Yes, she finally said. I've always known. I just didn't know what to do about it, so I pretended not to see it. Her admission hit me harder than I expected. All these years, I'd assumed she was oblivious to the favoritism, or that she believed she deserved it. Hearing that she'd been aware all along was both validating and painful. It wasn't fair to you, she continued. It's never been fair, and I've benefited from it my whole life. I sat down on the bed, processing her words. Why are you saying this now? Because when you walked out of your own wedding reception, it was like seeing everything clearly for the first time, she said. The look on your face, I've never seen you like that before. You've always just taken it, accepted it, made excuses for them. For me. She wasn't wrong. I had spent my life making excuses for my family's behavior, rationalizing it, minimizing my own feelings to maintain the peace. I don't want to do that anymore, I said quietly. Good, she replied, surprising me again. You shouldn't have to. We talked for nearly an hour. Really talked, perhaps for the first time as adults. About growing up in our parents' house. About the pressure she felt to be perfect. About my perpetual sense of invisibility. We didn't solve anything, but there was a new honesty between us that felt like the beginning of something different. They want to talk to you, she said near the end of our conversation. They're really upset. About me leaving, or about how it made them look? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Probably both, she admitted. But they also seem confused. I don't think they understand why what they did was wrong. That didn't surprise me. My parents had always been blind to the impact of their behavior on me. They weren't deliberately cruel people, just profoundly self-absorbed and incapable of seeing beyond their own perspective. I'm not ready to talk to them yet, I said. I understand, Lily replied. Just don't disappear, okay? I'd like to try to be a better sister. After we hung up, I sat by the window watching the waves, trying to process the conversation. Daniel found me there an hour later, still lost in thought. Everything okay? He asked, sitting beside me. I told him about my conversation with Lily. I don't know what to make of it, I confessed. Part of me wants to believe she's sincere, but there's another part that wonders if this is just temporary, guilt that will fade once things go back to normal. Daniel considered this. People can change, he said. Sometimes it takes a shock to the system to see things differently. Maybe, I agreed. But my parents, I'm not sure they're capable of that kind of change. You don't have to decide anything right now, he reminded me. You can take all the time you need. The next morning, as we were having breakfast on the porch, Martha approached with an envelope. "Special delivery," she said with a small smile. A rather determined young woman dropped it off, said she's your best friend and wouldn't leave until I promised to give it to you personally. I took the envelope, immediately recognizing Tessa's handwriting. Inside was a letter and several photographs. "Dearest Emma," the letter began. "I don't know when you'll get this, but I wanted you to have these pictures from before everything went wrong. These moments were real and beautiful, and no one can take them away from you." The photographs were from the wedding ceremony and the beginning of the reception. Daniel and me exchanging vows, our first kiss as husband and wife, our first dance. Moments of pure joy captured before my parents' intervention. "Also," Tessa continued, "I thought you should know that something unexpected happened after you left. People talked, not just at the reception, but in the days that followed. Your parents' friends, your father's colleagues, they've been reaching out to check on you. No one thought what your parents did was okay. Your Aunt Judith apparently gave them quite the lecture about it." I smiled at the thought of my father's straight-talking sister putting him in his place. Judith had always been different from the rest of the family, more direct, less concerned with appearances. "The point is," Tessa wrote, "you're not alone in thinking this was wrong. And maybe, just maybe, your parents are beginning to realize that too. Whether or not you choose to give them another chance is entirely up to you, but I thought you should know that your leaving made an impact not just on them, but on everyone who witnessed it." I handed the letter to Daniel, who read it thoughtfully. "She's right, you know," he said when he finished. "What happened at the reception doesn't erase the beauty of our ceremony or what our marriage means." I looked at the photographs again, feeling a complex mix of emotions. "No," I agreed, "it doesn't." That evening, sitting on the beach as the sun set, I finally felt ready to make some decisions. I couldn't control whether my parents would ever truly understand the harm they'd caused, but I could decide how I wanted to move forward. "I think I'm ready to head home tomorrow," I told Daniel. "Not to see my parents yet. I'm still not ready for that. But to start our life together. The one we planned." He smiled, brushing sand from my hair. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "I don't want to let what they did keep us in limbo. We have plane tickets for Italy next week. We have plans, dreams. I want to focus on those, not on what went wrong." "What about your parents?" he asked gently. I considered the question carefully. "I'm going to write them a letter," I decided, explaining how their behavior has affected me, not just at the wedding but throughout my life. I'll tell them that I need some time and space, and that when I'm ready to talk, it will be with clear boundaries in place. "That sounds healthy," he said, squeezing my hand. "I don't know if they'll understand," I admitted. "They might see it as an overreaction or blame me for making a scene at the reception, but for once, I'm not going to worry about their reaction. This is about what I need." Daniel nodded, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "I'm proud of you, you know." The words warmed something inside me. All my life, I'd sought that sentiment from my parents, craving their pride and approval. How ironic that in finally giving up that pursuit, I'd found someone whose pride in me felt genuine and earned. The next morning, as we prepared to leave the bed and breakfast, Martha handed me a small package wrapped in blue paper. "A belated wedding gift," she said with a warm smile, "for the new beginning." Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For writing your own story," the inscription read, "not the one others expect of you." I hugged her, unexpectedly moved by the thoughtfulness of this woman who had been a stranger just days ago. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." As we drove away from the coast, I felt different than when we'd arrived, more grounded, more certain of myself. The hurt hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more manageable, less raw. "What's the first thing you want to do when we get home?" Daniel asked as we merged onto the highway. I thought about it, realizing that for the first time in years, I was making decisions based solely on what I wanted, not on how others might react or what they might think. "I want to send out those thank you cards we addressed before the wedding," I said, "to everyone who shared in our ceremony, to let them know that despite how things ended, we're grateful they were there to witness our beginning." Daniel glanced at me, his expression soft. "I like that." "And then," I continued, "I want to finish packing for our honeymoon. I want to walk the streets of Rome and eat too much pasta and take hundreds of photographs. I want to start our life together the way we planned." The road stretched before us, leading back to our small apartment, to our jobs, to the life we were building together. But something had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the person who would silence her own needs to keep the peace. No longer the daughter who accepted being overlooked as her natural place in the family hierarchy. I didn't know exactly what would happen with my parents, whether they could ever truly understand the impact of their behavior, or if our relationship would ever heal. But for the first time, I wasn't defining myself through their eyes. The woman who drove away from her own wedding reception wasn't running away. She was running toward herself. Toward the person she'd always been beneath the need for approval and acceptance. Toward a life defined by her own choices, her own boundaries, her own sense of worth. As we drove toward home, I opened the journal Martha had given me and began to write. Not about the past, but about the future. About the life Daniel and I would build together. About the woman I was becoming. It was time to write my own story. Rome was everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd expected. The ancient city embraced us with warm terracotta buildings and cobblestone streets that seemed to whisper stories from centuries past. Daniel and I wandered through piazzas hand in hand, marveling at fountains and architecture that had witnessed empires rise and fall. Somehow being surrounded by such timeless beauty put my family drama into perspective. Standing before the Colosseum, I realized that generations of people had experienced joy, pain, betrayal, and redemption on these same stones. My story was just one among millions, yet it was mine to write. "Penny for your thoughts?" Daniel asked, capturing my contemplative expression with his camera. I smiled, leaning against a sun-warmed column. "I was just thinking about how small we are in the grand scheme of things. All these ancient ruins have seen so much human drama, and they're still standing. It makes me feel like I can survive my family issues." Daniel lowered his camera, his eyes warm. "You're not just surviving, Emma. You're choosing how to live. There's power in that." He was right. For the first time in my life, I was making conscious choices about my relationships, rather than simply accepting what was offered. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. We spent 2 blissful weeks exploring Italy, eating gelato by the Spanish Steps, tossing coins into the Trevi fountain, sipping wine in Tuscan vineyards, and getting pleasantly lost in Venice's labyrinthine streets. I didn't check my email or social media. The only people we contacted were Tessa and Daniel's parents, sending them photos and brief updates to let them know we were well. It was the honeymoon we'd planned, unmarred by the shadow of what had happened at our reception. We were determined not to let my parents' actions taint this precious time together. On our last evening in Florence, watching the sunset paint the Arno River gold, I finally felt ready to check my phone for messages from home. There were several missed calls from my parents and a voicemail from my mother that I couldn't bring myself to listen to yet. But there was also an email from Lily, sent just a few days ago. "I hope you're having an amazing honeymoon," she wrote. "I wanted to let you know that I've been thinking a lot about our conversation and about our family dynamic. Yesterday, I finally told Mom and Dad how I felt about what happened at your wedding, and about how they've always treated you differently. It didn't go well. They don't see it. They insisted they love all their children equally, and that I was being dramatic. It was frustrating and eye-opening at the same time. For the first time, I saw what you've been dealing with your entire life. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. Take all the time you need before talking to them, but I hope we can continue working on our relationship when you're back. Enjoy the rest of your time in Italy. You deserve every moment of happiness. I handed the phone to Daniel so he could read Lily's message. What do you think? He asked after he finished reading. I gazed out at the Ponte Vecchio, considering. I think she's being sincere. And I appreciate that she tried to talk to them, even if it didn't help. Do you want to respond? I nodded, typing a brief but warm reply thanking Lily for her support and letting her know we'd connect when we returned home. It felt strange but good to be building this new, more honest relationship with my sister. The flight home was long, but peaceful. I spent much of it writing in the journal Martha had given me, reflecting on how much had changed in just a few weeks. When we finally arrived back at our apartment, I felt a curious mixture of exhaustion and renewal. Our home looked exactly as we'd left it. Half-packed boxes still scattered around from our pre-wedding move-in. Wedding gifts stacked neatly in one corner waiting to be opened. The chaos of our hasty departure evident in small ways throughout. The space. Yet it felt different somehow, like we were returning as different people than those who had left. Home sweet home, Daniel said, dropping our suitcases in the entryway. I looked around, truly seeing our space with fresh eyes. We never really got to settle in properly, did we? Between the wedding planning and everything that happened after. Well, Daniel said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. We have time now. We can make this place ours. No rush, no pressure. The next morning, after a deep, jet-lagged sleep, I woke up feeling ready to face reality again. I still wasn't prepared to deal with my parents, but there were other aspects of life that needed attention. I had taken 2 weeks off from my teaching position at Westfield Elementary, and school would be starting again soon. There were lesson plans to prepare, classroom decorations to create, and a new group of third-grade students to get ready for. Focusing on work provided a welcome distraction. I loved teaching art to elementary school children. Their uninhibited creativity, their honest reactions, their ability to see beauty in unexpected places. In many ways, my classroom had always been a sanctuary, a place where I felt valued and where my contributions mattered. 3 days after our return, Tessa came over for dinner. She hugged me fiercely at the door, as if making sure I was really okay. "You look good," she said, studying my face. "Italy agrees with you." I laughed, leading her into our small dining area where Daniel was setting the table. Italy was exactly what we needed. Over pasta, our attempt to recreate a dish we'd fallen in love with in Rome, Tessa filled us in on what had been happening in our absence. Apparently, my parents had reached out to several of our friends trying to locate us, though they'd stopped after Tessa assured them we were fine and just needed space. "Your mother called me 3 times, Tessa said, rolling her eyes. Each time, she seemed more confused than angry. She kept saying she didn't understand why you'd leave your own wedding over a little family news. I sighed, twirling pasta around my fork. That sounds like her. Complete inability to see anyone else's perspective. The weird thing is, Tessa continued, your dad actually called me separately. He seemed, I don't know, reflective? He asked if you'd ever mentioned feeling overlooked in the family. I told him he should probably have that conversation with you directly. That surprised me. My father had never been one for introspection or emotional conversations. The fact that he had reached out to Tessa with that specific question made me wonder if something had shifted in his thinking. Have you decided when you're going to talk to them? Tessa asked cautiously. I glanced at Daniel, who gave me an encouraging nod. I wrote them a letter while we were in Italy, I said. I haven't sent it yet, but I think I'm ready to. I explained how their behavior at the wedding was part of a lifelong pattern and that I need some time and space to figure out what kind of relationship I want with them moving forward. Tessa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That sounds healthy and brave. After dinner, when Tessa had gone home and Daniel was washing dishes, I pulled out the letter I'd written to my parents. Reading it over one more time, I felt confident in my words. They were honest but not cruel, firm but not vindictive. I had expressed my hurt without attacking them, set boundaries without issuing ultimatums. I slipped the letter into an envelope, addressed it, and applied a stamp. Daniel found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the sealed envelope. "Ready for the mailbox tomorrow?" he asked gently. I nodded. "I think so. It feels like the right next step." The following week was busy with school preparations. I transformed my classroom into an underwater wonderland for the new school year, complete with paper fish hanging from the ceiling and a dive into art bulletin board. Creating this magical space for my students helped center me, reminding me of the joy and purpose I found in my work. On Wednesday afternoon, I was putting the finishing touches on a welcome sign when my classroom door opened. I turned, expecting to see another teacher or perhaps the principal, but instead found myself face to face with my father. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking out of place in his business suit among the colorful classroom decorations. "Your principal said I might find you here," he explained, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I set down my markers, suddenly very aware of my paint-splattered clothes and messy hair. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I got your letter," he said, taking a tentative step into the room. I thought maybe we should talk." I hadn't expected him to respond so quickly, and certainly not by showing up at my workplace. But there was something different about his demeanor, an uncertainty that was unfamiliar on my usually confident father. "I'm working right now," I said, not ready for this conversation in this setting. He nodded, glancing around the classroom, with new interest. "This is impressive. Did you do all this yourself?" The question caught me off guard. My father had never shown much interest in my teaching career before. "Yes," I answered. "I like to create a special environment for the kids each year." He moved closer to examine a display of previous students' artwork that I'd framed and hung on one wall. "These are quite good," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "You must be a good teacher." The compliment, simple as it was, felt monumental coming from him. In all my years of teaching, he had never once acknowledged my skill or passion for my work. "Thank you," I said cautiously. "But I'm still in the middle of setting up and school starts Monday." He straightened, seeming to remember why he'd come. "Of course, I didn't mean to interrupt. After reading your letter, I realized there were things I needed to say to you in person. Would you and Daniel be willing to meet your mother and me for dinner? Maybe this weekend?" I hesitated, torn between wanting to maintain the boundary I'd established in my letter and recognizing that his initiative in coming here represented some kind of effort on his part. "I'll need to check with Daniel," I said finally. "But if we do meet, it would need to be somewhere neutral, not at your house." He nodded quickly. "Of course. Anywhere you'd be comfortable. Just let us know." After he left, I sat down at one of the tiny student desks, my mind racing. The fact that my father had come to my classroom, a space he'd never visited in all my years of teaching, felt significant. So did his unexpected compliment about my work. But I was wary of reading too much into these small gestures. That evening, Daniel and I discussed whether to meet my parents for dinner. "What do you think they want from this meeting?" he asked as we walked around our neighborhood after dinner. "I'm not sure," I admitted. My dad seemed different today. Less defensive than I expected. But that doesn't necessarily mean they understand why what they did was wrong. "Do you feel ready to see them?" I considered the question carefully. I think so. On neutral ground, with you there. And with the understanding that this is just a conversation, not an automatic return to the way things were. Daniel squeezed my hand. Then let's do it. But at the first sign that they're not respecting your boundaries, we leave. Deal? Deal. We arranged to meet my parents at a restaurant downtown on Saturday evening, not so fancy that it would feel formal, but nice enough to signal the importance of the conversation. I chose a place neither of us had been to before, wanting to avoid any location with existing associations or memories. As the day approached, I found myself increasingly anxious. I discussed my feelings with Dr. Winters, the therapist I'd started seeing shortly after our return from Italy. She had been helping me work through the complex emotions surrounding my family relationships and my newfound determination to establish healthier boundaries. "What's the worst that could happen at this dinner?" she asked during our session. "They could dismiss my feelings again," I said immediately. "Tell me I'm overreacting. Make it about them instead of listening to me." She nodded. "And if that happens?" "Then I leave," I said with more confidence than I felt. "I've been clear about what I need from them. If they can't provide that, then I maintain my distance until they can." "And the best that could happen?" This question was harder. I'd spent so much time preparing for disappointment that I hadn't really allowed myself to consider positive outcomes. I guess they could actually hear me, understand why their behavior hurt me, maybe even apologize. Do you think that's possible? I thought about my father's unexpected visit to my classroom, the unusual uncertainty in his manner. I don't know. Maybe. For the first time, I think my dad might be willing to listen. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze, a beautiful late summer evening that belied my inner turbulence. Daniel and I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, wanting to be settled before my parents arrived. I chose a table in a quiet corner that would allow for private conversation. My parents arrived precisely on time, my mother looking elegant but tense in a floral dress, my father more casual than usual in a button-down shirt without a tie. They approached our table with visible apprehension, as if unsure of their welcome. "Emma, Daniel," my mother said, her voice carrying a forced brightness. "It's good to see you both. How was Italy?" "Beautiful," Daniel replied smoothly as we all sat down. "We have some photos to show you later if you'd like." An awkward silence descended as we studied our menus and ordered drinks. I could feel my parents' eyes on me, waiting for me to set the tone of the conversation. For once, they were following my lead rather than imposing their own agenda. After our drinks arrived, my father cleared his throat. "Emma, first I want to say that your letter, it gave me a lot to think about. Some of what you wrote was hard to hear, but I needed to hear it." This direct acknowledgement surprised me. I'd expected defensiveness or deflection, not this apparent openness. "Both your father and I have been doing some soul-searching," my mother added, her usual composure slipping to reveal genuine emotion. "The way you left the wedding. We've never seen you do anything like that before. It made us realize something was very wrong." "Something has been wrong for a long time," I said quietly. "That was just the breaking point." My father nodded, his expression pained. "Lily tried to explain it to us, but I think we needed to hear it from you. Your letter made me see things I've been blind to for years." "Like what?" I asked, still skeptical but willing to listen. "Like the fact that we've consistently prioritized your siblings' accomplishments over yours," he said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "That we've never really taken the time to understand your choices or appreciate your path." "When I came to your classroom this week," he continued, "I realized I'd never actually seen you in your element before. Teaching, creating that amazing space for your students. I've been so focused on what I thought success should look like that I missed seeing how successful you already are. just in a different way than I expected. Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at hearing my father acknowledge what I'd felt for so long. I glanced at Daniel, who gave me an encouraging smile. "Your wedding day should have been about you and Daniel," my mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "Making Lily's announcement at your reception was thoughtless and selfish. We were so caught up in our excitement for her that we didn't consider how it would affect you. I'm deeply sorry, Emma." The apology I'd waited for all my life hung in the air between us. It wasn't perfect. There was still an undertone of not fully understanding the depth of the hurt they'd caused, but it was sincere. And for my parents, who rarely admitted to being wrong about anything, it represented a significant step. "Thank you for saying that," I said, taking a slow breath to steady myself. "I appreciate the apology, but I need you to understand that what happened at the wedding was just one moment in a lifetime of similar moments. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, things need to change fundamentally." My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "What would that look like, Emma? What do you need from us moving forward?" The question hung in the air, weighted, with possibility. For the first time in my life, my parents were asking what I needed rather than telling me what they expected. The shift was subtle but profound. "I need you to respect my choices," I said carefully. "My career, my marriage, my priorities. They're different from what you might have wanted for me, but they're mine. I need you to see value in them, even if they're not what you would have chosen." My mother nodded, her eyes unexpectedly bright, with unshed tears. "We can do that. I also need you to be mindful of the patterns that have hurt me in the past," I continued, gaining confidence. "The way you compare me to James and Lily, the way you minimize my accomplishments while celebrating, that needs to stop." My father sighed deeply. "I didn't realize how often we did that until I read your letter. Looking back now, I can see it so clearly. How did I not notice before?" It was a genuine question, not a defensive deflection. I considered my answer carefully. "I think sometimes we accept the dynamics we're used to without questioning them," I said. "I did that too, for a long time. I accepted that my role in the family was to be overlooked." "Until the wedding," my mother said quietly. "Until the wedding," I agreed. Something broke in me that day. But maybe it needed to break so it could heal properly. The conversation continued through dinner, sometimes difficult, but remarkably honest. My parents listened more than they spoke, asking questions and absorbing my answers with newfound attention. Daniel contributed occasionally, offering his perspective with a gentleness that somehow made his points more impactful. "I love your daughter," he told my parents at one point. "Not despite her choices, but because of them. Her dedication to her students, her creativity, her independence, these are the things that make her exceptional. I wish you could see her the way I do." My mother reached across the table and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'd like to try," she said. "I'd like to understand who you really are, Emma, not who I expected you to be." By the time dessert arrived, the tension had eased considerably. We weren't a healed family yet. There were too many years of hurt for one dinner to erase, but we had taken the first tentative steps in a new direction. "There's something else we want to discuss," my father said as we finished our coffee. "We'd like to host a small dinner party next month. Nothing elaborate, just family and a few close friends. A proper celebration of your marriage, without any distractions or announcements." I glanced at Daniel, who gave me a subtle nod indicating the decision was mine. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I need to be sure this isn't just about making things look right to everyone else." "It's not," my father assured me. It's about giving you what we should have given you in the first place. Recognition and celebration focused entirely on you and Daniel. We understand if you're not ready, my mother added. We can wait until you are. Their willingness to respect my timeline, to recognize that rebuilding trust would take time, meant more to me than the offer itself. Let me think about it, I said. I'll let you know. As we said our goodbyes outside the restaurant, the evening air warm against our skin, my mother hugged me with uncharacteristic emotion. I love you, Emma, she whispered. I'm sorry it took something so dramatic for me to understand how I've hurt you. My father's hug was awkward but sincere, his usual reserve cracking to reveal genuine remorse. We'll do better, he promised. Not perfectly, but better. Driving home, Daniel and I processed the unexpected outcome of the dinner. What do you think? He asked. Do you believe they can change? I stared out the window at the passing streetlights, considering. I think they want to. Whether they can follow through consistently is another question. But this was more than I expected. So, the dinner party? I'm leaning toward yes, I admitted, with clear boundaries and expectations. He smiled, reaching over to take my hand. Look at you, setting conditions instead of just accepting whatever they offer. That's growth, Emma. He was right. 6 months ago, I would have gratefully accepted any gesture from my parents, regardless of whether it came with genuine understanding. Now I was evaluating their offer on my own terms, deciding what would be healthy for me rather than what would please them. The following week, I invited Lily to meet me for coffee at a small cafe near my school. Our conversation on the phone, after the wedding, had opened a door to a different kind of relationship, and I wanted to explore that further. She arrived looking nervous, her usual polished confidence subdued. Thanks for meeting me, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Thank you for standing up to Mom and Dad, I replied. That couldn't have been easy. She shrugged, stirring her latte absently. Honestly, it felt long overdue, and it was nowhere near what you did at the wedding. We're not comparing courage, I said with a small smile, but I appreciate the solidarity. She looked up, her expression earnest. I meant what I said in my email, Emma. I want to be a better sister. I've been thinking a lot about all the times I accepted preferential treatment without questioning it, all the times I let them dismiss your achievements while celebrating mine. I was complicit in that, and I'm sorry. The apology touched me deeply. Unlike my parents, Lily seemed to fully grasp the nature of the family dynamic and her role in maintaining it. What changed for you? I asked, genuinely curious. She considered the question, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Watching you walk out of your own wedding reception was illuminating. I'd never seen you stand up for yourself like that before. It made me question why you'd never felt able to, and what part I'd played in that. And what did you conclude? That I'd been selfish, she said simply. I liked being the golden child. It was comfortable even when I knew it wasn't fair to you. But comfort isn't the same as growth, is it? Her insight surprised me. This was a side of Lily I'd never seen before. Reflective, self-aware, willing to examine her own behavior critically. No, it's not, I agreed. Growth usually requires some discomfort. Like giving up a lifelong pattern of accepting preferential treatment, she said with a rueful smile. It's harder than I expected. We talked for over an hour, delving into childhood memories and family patterns with new honesty. For the first time, I felt like I was talking to a peer rather than competing with a rival. It was liberating to speak openly about experiences we'd both shared but never acknowledged. Mom and Dad mentioned they want to host a dinner party for you and Daniel, Lily said as our conversation wound down. Are you going to let them? I'm considering it, I said. What do you think? Is it a genuine effort or just damage control? She thought for a moment. I think it's both. They're genuinely sorry and want to make amends, but they're also uncomfortable with the way things ended at the wedding. Their reputation matters to them. Her honesty was refreshing. That's what I thought too. If you do agree to it, she said, I promise not to announce any life achievements during the event. We both laughed, the tension finally breaking. I'd appreciate that, I said dryly. The following Sunday, Daniel and I invited his parents over for dinner. They had been supportive but understandably concerned after the wedding debacle, and I wanted to reassure them that we were working through the family issues. Susan and Robert Mitchell were everything my parents weren't: warm, straightforward, and genuinely interested in our lives without imposing their expectations. They had welcomed me into their family with open arms from the beginning, appreciating me for exactly who I was. So you're considering letting your parents host another event? Susan asked as we cleared the dinner plates. Are you sure that's a good idea? I'm not sure of anything, I admitted. But I think it might be a necessary step in establishing a new type of relationship with them. Just be careful, she advised gently. People don't change overnight. I know, I said. But I have to give them the chance to try, don't I? Robert, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. You don't have to do anything, Emma. That's the point. This is your choice, not your obligation. His words resonated deeply. He was right. Reconciliation was an option, not a requirement. The realization was oddly freeing. I could choose to work on rebuilding my relationship with my parents because I wanted to, not because I owed it to them. You're right, I said. Thank you for reminding me of that. After they left, Daniel found me sitting on our small balcony, looking up at the night sky. Penny for your thoughts? He asked, settling into the chair beside me. I was thinking about choices, I said, about how powerful it is to realize that reconciliation with my parents is something I can choose rather than something I'm obligated to pursue. He nodded, understanding immediately. So what do you choose? I considered the question carefully. I choose to give them the opportunity to show they can change. Not because I need their approval anymore, but because I'd like to have a healthier relationship with them if that's possible. And if it's not possible, then I'll know I tried, I said, and I'll be able to establish whatever boundaries I need with a clear conscience. The next day, I called my mother and told her we would accept their offer to host a small celebration dinner, with a few conditions. It would be intimate, just family and our closest friends. There would be no announcements or surprises, and Daniel and I would approve the guest list. Of course, she agreed readily. Whatever makes you comfortable, Emma. Her easy acceptance of my terms was another small indication that something had shifted. The mother I'd grown up with would have pushed back, would have insisted on doing things her way. This new willingness to accommodate my preferences felt like unfamiliar territory. Over the next few weeks, my parents continued to demonstrate small but meaningful changes. My mother called to ask about my classroom preparation rather than talking exclusively about Lily's medical school orientation. My father emailed to ask if I would show him some of my students' artwork sometime, expressing genuine interest in my teaching methods. These gestures didn't erase the past, but they suggested a sincere effort to create a different future. I approached them with cautious optimism, reminding myself that true change happens gradually, with occasional setbacks and recommitments. The dinner party was scheduled for a Saturday evening in early October. As the date approached, I found myself growing increasingly anxious. Despite my parents' recent efforts, part of me feared a return to old patterns once we were in a social setting. Dr. Winters helped me develop strategies for managing my anxiety and for responding effectively if problematic family dynamics emerged. Remember, you've already demonstrated that you can set boundaries, she reminded me during our session. You've proven that to your parents, and more importantly, to yourself. The night of the dinner, Daniel and I arrived at my parents' house, 30 minutes early to help with final arrangements and to center ourselves before other guests arrived. My mother had transformed the dining room into an elegant but understated celebration space. White roses and lilies, my favorite flowers, adorned the table. Photographs of Daniel and me throughout our relationship were displayed on a side table, along with a few select images from our wedding ceremony. "What do you think?" she asked nervously as I took in the scene. "It's beautiful," I said honestly. "Thank you for respecting our preference for something intimate." She squeezed my hand, her expression soft. "This is your celebration, Emma. It should reflect what matters to you and Daniel." My father emerged from the kitchen, looking slightly out of place in an apron. "I'm attempting to help with the hors d'oeuvres," he explained with a self-deprecating smile. "Your mother is being very patient with my culinary limitations." The normality of the moment, my father trying something new, my mother appreciating my preferences, both of them focused on creating a pleasant experience for us, felt both strange and heartening. Guests began arriving at 7. Tessa came, with her boyfriend Jeremy, bringing a bottle of the Italian wine Daniel and I had raved about after our honeymoon. Daniel's parents arrived bearing a small wrapped package, which they insisted we open immediately. Inside was a handcrafted wooden frame containing a photograph Daniel had taken of us on our first morning at the coastal bed and breakfast, standing on the beach with the sunrise behind us. Though it was just a selfie taken on his phone, he had somehow captured a moment of genuine peace and connection amidst the chaos of that time. "We had it professionally printed and framed," Susan explained. "We thought you might want a memento of your unconventional honeymoon start." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to my eyes. "It's perfect," I said, hugging them both. "Thank you." James arrived with his wife Amanda, both of them making a point to congratulate us warmly and to compliment the intimate setting. Lily was the last to arrive, looking elegant but understated in a simple blue dress. "No Princeton colors tonight," she whispered to me with a wink as she hugged me hello, referencing the banner that had caused such pain at the wedding reception. Dinner was delicious. My mother had hired the same caterer we'd used for the wedding reception, recreating some of our favorite dishes from that abbreviated celebration. The conversation flowed easily, focusing on happy memories, future plans, and genuinely inclusive family stories rather than competitive comparisons. When it came time for toasts, I felt myself tense instinctively, memories of my father's backhanded compliments at the reception still fresh. Daniel sensed my anxiety and reached for my hand under the table, his touch grounding me. My father stood, glass in hand, his expression unusually vulnerable. "When Emma was little," he began, and I felt a jolt of déjà vu at the familiar opening. But what followed was entirely different. "When Emma was little," he continued, "she had this remarkable ability to find beauty in unexpected places. While other children walked past fallen leaves or interesting rocks without a second glance, Emma collected them, treasured them, saw their unique qualities." He paused, his voice growing more emotional. I didn't always understand or appreciate that gift. I was looking for more conventional achievements, more obvious successes. But standing in her classroom a few weeks ago, seeing how she's nurturing that same ability in her students, helping them see beauty and possibility where others might miss it, I realized what an extraordinary gift that truly is. He turned to face Daniel and me directly. "Daniel, you saw in our daughter what we were sometimes too blind to see, her compassion, her creativity, her quiet strength. You treasure her gifts rather than measuring them against some arbitrary standard. I can't thank you enough for that, for loving her exactly as she is." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.